Why does he suddenly reappear the moment you stop calling, texting, or caring? Why does his interest spike only after you finally walk away? It's not a coincidence, it's psychology. When you go silent, you disrupt the pattern he relied on. The comfort of your attention vanishes and it stings more than he expected. Your absence creates space for his desire to breathe again. Suddenly, you're not predictable. You're not available. And in that mystery, you become magnetic. It's not about playing games. It's about shifting the energy. Your silence says, I know my worth. I don't chase. I choose. That self-respect is irresistible. It forces him to question what he thought he could take for granted. Now, his ego is on edge. His comfort is gone. His curiosity is lit. He starts asking, why isn't she reaching out? Is she over me? Has she moved on? And in that emotional silence, a powerful truth begins to echo. He was never the center of your world, but you were the center of his. That's the moment he realizes he can't stay away. And if you've done it right, by then, you won't even need him to. We often underestimate the power of silence. We think that love, interest, and connection are all communicated through words, through action, through showing up. And that's true to a point. But sometimes it's not the things we say that change everything. It's the absence of our voice, the absence of our effort, the absence of our constant presence in someone's life. That, ironically, can be louder than anything we've ever said. Now, I want you to think about a dynamic many of us fall into. You're in a situation with a guy, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's something undefined, but you're the one keeping things alive. You initiate conversations, you reach out to check in, you make plans, you remind him of what you both once had. Maybe you even explain your feelings repeatedly, hoping he'll finally get it, hoping he'll finally understand what you need. But slowly, without even realizing it, he begins to expect this. It becomes normal. You become the one holding the emotional rope between the two of you. And because you're doing the work of staying connected, he doesn't have to. You're filling the space, you're closing the gap, and he's comfortable, not because he's deeply fulfilled or fully invested, but because he knows you'll always be there. He doesn't have to reach out because you will. He doesn't have to make an effort because you're doing it for both of you. So what happens when you stop? What happens when one day, without warning, you go silent? Suddenly, the pattern breaks. And this is important because patterns in relationships are everything. They're the subconscious routines that tell us what to expect from another person. And when those patterns are consistent, we stop thinking about them. We stop questioning. But the moment you disrupt the pattern, when you stop texting, stop calling, stop chasing, it sends a shock through the system. He notices. Maybe not right away, but he does. At first, he might assume it's temporary. He might tell himself, you're just busy, or you're playing hard to get. But the longer it goes, the more unsettled he becomes. Not because he necessarily misses the content of your messages, but because your attention is no longer guaranteed. Your energy, your presence, it's no longer a constant in his life. And here's where things really start to shift. That absence, it creates a vacuum. And nature, as we know, hates a vacuum. Where there was once noise, now there's space. Where there was once certainty, now there's ambiguity. And ambiguity makes people think. It forces them to reflect. He starts to wonder, did she stop caring? Has she moved on? Why hasn't she reached out? And for the first time in a long time, he has to confront a reality that he never considered, that you might be done, that maybe you finally realize that effort isn't meant to be one-sided, that maybe you got tired of being the only one fighting. This shift in dynamic can be powerful, not because it's manipulative, but because it reveals truth. It reveals whether he was leaning on your effort as a crutch or whether he truly values and wants to nurture the connection himself. It shows you whether he was showing up because he wanted to or because he didn't have to do much at all. Sometimes the moment you stop filling the space is the moment you find out if he was ever willing to step into it. And that's what makes silence so powerful. It's not about games. It's about stepping back to let the truth breathe. To stop forcing something and see what happens when you don't. When you remove yourself from the cycle and give someone the opportunity to either come closer or walk away. The irony is that the very thing that often makes him come back isn't the conversation, the explanations, the vulnerability you shared. It's the space you finally created. The silence that makes him realize something has changed, that you've changed, that you're no longer pouring energy into someone who isn't meeting you halfway. And that's where desire often reawakens, not because he suddenly sees something he never saw before, but because he lost something he assumed would always be there. You took back your power, quietly, no drama, no accusations, just silence. And in that silence, you said the one thing he wasn't ready to hear. I'm done trying to be chosen by someone who isn't choosing me. When you stop reaching out, when you go silent, something really interesting begins to happen. And most people don't realize the power of that moment because we're taught that love is about action, about showing up, about making the effort. And it is. But there's another side to connection that often gets overlooked, and it's space. Space isn't just absence. It's emotional presence in silence. And that kind of space, when used with intention, creates a completely different dynamic between two people. When you've been in a dynamic where you're always initiating, always checking in, always being the emotional glue that holds everything together, you might not even realize how much you're doing until you stop. And when you stop, it's not about playing games. It's about restoring balance. It's about taking your energy back and redirecting it where it truly belongs, to you. Because here's the thing, desire doesn't grow in constant proximity. It grows in distance. It's not the messages you keep sending him that make him appreciate you. It's the silence between the messages. It's not the constant access to your attention that deepens his feelings. It's when that attention disappears that he suddenly realizes how much it mattered, how much you mattered. We don't crave what's always available. We crave what we have to earn, what we feel lucky to receive. And when you're silent, when you stop feeding that loop of always showing him you're there, always filling in the space, he finally has to sit with the weight of your absence. That's when memory becomes more powerful than conversation. That's when moments with you start to replay in his mind, not because you're reminding him, but because there's nothing else filling the void. Silence forces emotional responsibility. Suddenly, he can't rely on your words to soothe him, your presence to validate him, or your consistency to comfort him. And when a man feels that shift, he either panics and scrambles to get that connection back, or he retreats because he realizes he was never ready to meet your standard in the first place. Either way, your silence acts as a filter. It reveals his true intentions more clearly than any conversation ever could. This is the irony that no one talks about, that by doing less, you're actually creating more impact. Because the moment he feels the silence, he doesn't just miss your texts or your voice. He starts to remember how he felt when he was with you. Not because you're showing up to remind him, but because you've taken a step back, and that vacuum is now doing the work. And what fills that vacuum? His own reflection, his own realization. That's when the weight of everything he took for granted begins to hit. When you go silent, it allows the emotional pendulum to swing back. It creates a reset in the dynamic. It gives him the chance to step into the space, to show up, to question what he's lost, instead of continuing to consume your presence like it's on tap. You're not punishing him by going silent. You're simply choosing not to participate in a dynamic that was draining you. And when someone who brought light and energy and warmth into your life suddenly goes quiet, it echoes. Most people are terrified of silence because they think it means being forgotten. But silence, when it comes from strength and self-worth, is unforgettable. It's the kind of quiet that makes someone look around and think, where did she go? And not just physically, but emotionally, energetically. That absence begins to haunt him because it's not just silence, it's contrast. It's the difference between how full his life felt with you in it and how empty it now feels without you. There's a point where a man begins to realize that your silence isn't coming from neediness or from playing games. It's coming from clarity. You're not talking because there's nothing more to say. You've said it all. You've shown it all. And now it's his turn to feel something, to notice, to decide, to step up or let go. And trust me, if he has any depth of connection to you at all, he will feel it. Silence isn't passive. It speaks. And sometimes it speaks louder than any words you could ever say. You're not disappearing. You're just no longer making yourself the emotional caretaker of someone who didn't even know they were being held. That silence, that pause, is the moment where everything shifts. That's when he starts to realize he doesn't want to live in a world where you're no longer in reach. Because the truth is, your value doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It doesn't beg to be seen. It quietly walks away and makes everything else echo in comparison. There's something funny that happens when you stop trying, when you stop texting first, when you stop asking how he feels, when you stop waiting for a breadcrumb and finally choose silence. A shift occurs, not just in him, but in the entire dynamic between you. And it's this shift that exposes something so deeply human. We want what we can't easily have. Let me explain. When someone feels your energy constantly available, your attention, your affection, your care, they begin to normalize it. It becomes the background noise of their life. They may like it, even rely on it, but they stop feeling the urgency to earn it. Why? Because it's always there. They believe she'll always be around. I don't have to do much. But the moment you go quiet, it disrupts that comfort. The ego, his ego, isn't used to that kind of silence. It was used to knowing that you were just a message away, that no matter what he did or didn't do, you'd still be standing there waiting for him to figure things out. And now, suddenly, you're not. Suddenly, there's no response, no follow-up text, no anxious checking in. There's just space. And with that space comes discomfort. Not for you, but for him. The ego starts panicking. Wait, what's going on? Did I lose her? Is she angry? Is she over it? And here's the thing. The ego doesn't respond to love as much as it responds to challenge. We like to believe people come back because they suddenly realize how much they love us. But often, the first thing that pulls them back in is the threat of losing something they thought they owned. That's how fragile and reactive the ego can be. You see, the chase isn't just about romance. It's about psychology. If someone thinks they can have you whenever they want, they don't value the moment. They don't invest in the connection because it's not at risk. But when you pull your energy back, the ego scrambles to restore the dynamic where it felt in control. That's why he texts out of nowhere. That's why he just wants to check in. That's why after you've spent weeks in silence, he finally asks how you're doing, like nothing happened. But what you need to understand is that this reaction isn't necessarily love. It's the ego craving validation. It's the part of him that wants reassurance that you're still there, still emotionally available, still orbiting him, even though he gave you no reason to. And if you break your silence just to soothe that insecurity, you go right back into the cycle, one where he gets all the comfort without doing any of the work. That's why silence is so powerful. It's not passive, it's an action. It's a statement that says, I am no longer available for the version of this relationship where I overgive and you undershow up. And when you send that message, not through words, but through absence, it wakes something up in him. It forces him to look at the mirror and ask, did I lose her? And that question terrifies the ego far more than your presence ever did. People respond differently to silence. The right person, the one who actually wants to build something real, will be shaken by it in a way that makes them reflect, not just react. They'll come back with clarity, not confusion, with consistency, not crumbs. But someone who just misses the attention, who just wants to know they still have you on a leash, will come back only to test the waters, to see if they still have power over you. That's why you have to hold your silence, not as a game, but as a boundary. Because when you stop feeding someone's ego with your availability, it becomes clear whether they were truly invested in you or just addicted to how you made them feel about themselves. There's something undeniably magnetic about a woman who isn't trying to prove her worth. A woman who can sit in silence instead of chasing answers. A woman who doesn't need to remind someone what they're losing because her absence does that for her. That energy is unforgettable. That's the kind of energy that haunts someone long after you've stopped talking. Not because you disappeared, but because you stood in your power. And that power, once felt, is impossible to ignore. That's why he can't stay away. When you go silent, most people assume you're playing a game, that you're trying to make someone miss you, or you're punishing them for not treating you right. But real silence, the kind that makes a man take a second look, isn't rooted in manipulation. It's rooted in self-worth. It's a quiet, powerful act of reclaiming your energy. And that's exactly what makes it so effective. You see, anyone can withdraw to try and get a reaction. That's not strength. That's strategy. But when your silence comes from a genuine place of clarity, when it says, I've realized what I need and I'm not getting it, it carries an entirely different energy. It's not cold. It's not angry. It's calm. It's composed. It's a boundary being drawn without the need for explanation or permission. And here's what most people overlook. When you remove yourself from a dynamic where your needs weren't being met, you're not just disappearing from his life, you're redefining the role you play in it. You're no longer the one who's always available, who's always there to cushion the fall, who's always giving second, third, or fourth chances. You're now the person who respects herself enough to walk away from confusion, inconsistency, or crumb. And that is magnetic because it's rare. Most people stay. Most people wait. Most people hold on a little too long hoping for change. But when you stop explaining, stop arguing, stop overgiving, when you simply stop showing up for someone who stopped showing up for you, it shocks the system. And he feels it. He feels the difference between someone who's still trying to convince him and someone who's realized they no longer need to. Think about it. What's more attractive? Someone who's trying to prove they're worthy of love, or someone who already knows they are? There's a quiet confidence in silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. It says, I'm not going to fight for a place in your life if you're not making space for me. That kind of energy, it commands respect, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Men are drawn to women who have standards, who have boundaries, who don't just talk about their worth, but who act on it, even if that means walking away from someone they still care about. That's not easy. It takes incredible emotional maturity to love someone and still say, this isn't enough for me. And when you do that, you stop being an option. You become a lesson, one that lingers long after the silence has set in. That's the thing. He might not realize it immediately. Some men need time, space, absence. They need to sit in the silence long enough to realize what your presence really meant. And that's okay. Because this silence isn't about him. It's about you. It's about what you're no longer willing to accept. It's about protecting your peace, even if it means letting go of someone you hoped would fight for you. When you go silent from that place, you're not closing the door to connection. You're just refusing to hold it open for someone who won't walk through it. And believe me, that shift, that graceful exit, speaks volumes. It forces him to confront his own behavior without your voice softening the impact. It leaves him with nothing but the echo of his choices and the memory of what he lost. And here's what's beautiful. That silence creates space for something else, for growth, for healing, for someone who will meet you where you are. It's not just about making him miss you. It's about making yourself matter again. So if you're in that place right now, if you've gone quiet, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect, stay there. Don't rush back to fill the space with apologies or explanations. Let your silence do the work. Let it be the boundary. Let it be the moment he realizes that the version of you who tolerated less is gone. And what he's left with is the sound of someone choosing themselves. That's why he can't stay away. ChatGPT said, when someone thinks they've got you figured out, they stop paying attention. That's the truth. In the beginning, there's excitement because everything is new. He's trying to learn you, understand you, discover what makes you tick. But over time, if you're always responding, always available, always there when he reaches out, even when his effort is inconsistent, he stops wondering. He stops being curious. And once that curiosity fades, the energy shifts. He starts showing up less, reaching out less, trying less. Because the mystery that once pulled him in has slowly been replaced by predictability. He's no longer chasing something he feels he's already caught. But then something changes. You go silent. You stop explaining yourself. You stop showing up with that same emotional availability that he grew so used to. And in that silence, something powerful starts to happen. He loses control of the narrative. Suddenly, he doesn't know what's going on in your mind. He doesn't know if you're angry, if you've moved on, if you've stopped caring, or if maybe, just maybe, someone else has your attention now. That uncertainty drives him mad, because what he once thought he knew, gone. What he once assumed would always be there, now feels like it's slipping through his fingers. And this is where it gets interesting, because when he no longer has access to your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions, he has to guess. He has to imagine. And the imagination is always more powerful than reality. He starts replaying your last conversation. He analyzes your last message. He wonders if that silence is punishment or peace. He wonders if you're doing it to get a reaction or if you've genuinely detached. And that wondering creates tension, emotional tension. It triggers a primal need to solve a puzzle that he never realized was forming. See, people chase certainty when they're insecure, but they chase mystery when they're intrigued. And by going silent, not as a game, but as a boundary, you've created something he hasn't felt in a long time, a gap in his perception of you. That mystery makes him start asking questions. Is she really done with me? Did she actually mean it when she said she was tired of being the only one trying? Was she stronger than I gave her credit for? He begins to realize that everything he thought he had control over, he doesn't any. He thought he had the power because he could come and go as he pleased and you'd always be there. But now your silence has become louder than any words you've ever said. It's not cold. It's not cruel. It's clarity. And clarity is terrifying when someone isn't ready to lose you. In that silence, you become less accessible, less defined. And that's where the emotional shift happens. When you were fully available, he didn't have to work to keep you. Now he's wondering if he still even has you. That's the difference. Your silence turned the mirror back onto him. And instead of being able to distract himself with your responses or your affection, he has to sit with the consequences of his own inaction. And here's the part most people miss. This isn't about making him chase you. It's not about games or manipulation. It's about removing yourself from a dynamic that stopped valuing you. It's about not giving energy to someone who's not showing up consistently. And when you do that, not only do you protect your peace, you change how you're perceived. You stop being the woman who waits. You become the woman who walks. And that shift, that's magnetic, because now he's not just missing the good morning texts or the way you used to check in after a long day. He's missing how you made him feel. He's missing the emotional support he never appreciated. He's realizing that what he thought was ordinary was actually rare. And the reason he can't stay away isn't because you chased him, it's because you stopped. Because silence forced him to face the version of you he never thought he'd lose, the version who loved deeply, but finally chose herself. And that mystery you created by going quiet, that doesn't just bring him back, it makes him question everything he thought he knew about you. That's the power of silence. It doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't prove, it simply holds its ground and watches who's strong enough to step back in the right way. Not everyone will, but the ones who do come back different. You know what's really powerful? When someone realizes, truly realizes, that they are no longer the center of your world. That's the moment everything changes. Because for so long, he might have been used to that attention, to that comfort, to knowing that no matter what happened, there was a part of you that still revolved around him. Even if things weren't perfect, even if he pulled away, even if he gave you breadcrumbs, there was still that energy from you, checking in, over-explaining, hoping, waiting. But then one day, you go quiet. And it's not angry silence. It's not a silence designed to manipulate or punish. It's just this quiet shift in the air where you finally turned inward, where your energy is no longer focused on what he's thinking, but instead on how you feel. And that silence, that shift, it says more than words ever could. It says, I'm not centering my life around you anymore. That silence is different from just ignoring him, because ignoring is what people do when they still want a reaction. But what you've done, that's letting go. That's stepping out of the emotional tug of war. That's where your power begins. It's in that space where he starts to notice the void. He used to feel that constant tether, those good morning texts, those little check-ins, that warmth in your voice when he called. He might not have even acknowledged it at the time. He might have taken it completely for granted. But when it stops, something stirs. Because here's the truth. Most people don't notice how much they depend on your energy until it's no longer there, until they're scrolling through their phone and realizing there's no new message from you, until they say something vague and flirty and you don't reply, until they check your social media and suddenly you look unbothered. That does something to a person, especially someone who was used to being the gravitational pull in your emotional universe. And when that person no longer feels your orbit, their ego gets confused. Their emotions get confronted. Their comfort zone starts to crack. Because now there's no guarantee that you're still waiting. No sense that they can come back anytime and you'll be right there. No unspoken promise that you're still playing the role of the understanding one, the patient one, the one who always saw the potential in them. And when you go silent like that, when you stop trying to explain yourself, stop trying to fix things, stop trying to win someone over, you change the dynamic. You stop being the one who's chasing and become the one who's choosing. And that change, even if unspoken, is felt deeply. What you've done is reclaimed your emotional energy. You've taken it out of their hands and placed it back into your own life, into your friendships, your purpose, your peace, into remembering what it feels like to wake up and not carry the weight of trying to make someone else see your worth. And when a man feels that he's no longer the thing lighting up your day or occupying your mind or shaping your moods, he begins to question what happened. He begins to doubt his assumptions. He begins to realize that maybe, just maybe, he's not as central to your world as he once was. And that feeling, that can be a huge wake-up call. Because sometimes it takes your absence for someone to understand your value. It takes silence to make them hear what your words never could. Sometimes it's not the speech or the heartfelt message or the emotional talk that makes the difference. It's the stillness after you stop trying. That's the thing about emotional gravity. People can feel when it shifts. They feel when you're no longer tethered. And when a woman stops orbiting around a man and starts orbiting around herself, her peace, her purpose, her joy, she becomes the sun again. And when that happens, don't be surprised if he tries to come back, if he reaches out, if he starts wondering where he stands with you, because something in him will be craving that connection again. But this time, he won't be reaching for the version of you who was chasing him. He'll be reaching for the version who finally let go. And now, he won't just be wondering if you'll take him back, because the second he stops being the center of your world is the moment he realizes you were the center of his all along.